So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another replay battle. This one's going to be a 2v2 on... I can't actually remember the name of this map. I have played on it before, but I don't remember its name. But I lost, I remember that. And this one was sent to me by Fluffy Duck, and I think this might actually be the first one he sent to me, but this is good. Because he was, of course, part of the team which won the 2v2 tournament, which wasn't too long ago, so this should be a high-quality game. And he is playing as Isengard, so we'll go through his army first of all. And because of the amount of trees on this map before I get going, it's going to be very difficult for me to go through the army compositions of the red team in particular. But even Fluffy's ally will probably have troops hidden from view, especially considering the faction that they are playing. But let's go through Isengard first of all, and we've got some Uruk-hai infantry at the front, sans their armour upgrade. But Isengard are not usually the sort of faction you'll see with a bunch of hiding going on, but the trees on this map provide a good opportunity for everyone to sneak some units around the battlefield. At the front here we've got a single unit of the Dunlanding veterans, a little bit more of an attack-focused infantry unit. There aren't as many of them as the Uruk-hai though, so they will fall apart more quickly. But they're pretty cheap for what they offer you, so you know most of the Dunlanders are fairly cheap, so they can help plug in some gaps in terms of numbers into your army. We've got some more Uruk-hai infantry. Of course, we've got some archers as well. Most armies are going to be, well, most orc armies are going to be bringing some archers because they're potentially so cost-effective. They're usually so cheap. Again, they don't have their armor upgrade, but it doesn't really matter too much. The Uruk-hai archers are not quite the joke they once were. They do serve a purpose in this army now. And we have some Uruk-hai pikemen. Of course, you know, you're rarely going to see Isengard without their pikes because it is a really big selling point of their army. Very quality pikes that you can use to really tie down the centre of your opponent. It's very difficult to bust through the middle of Isengard with just infantry alone. It's going to take you a long time even if you do try to do that. Uruk-hai berserkers as well. Now the trees will offer some good cover to the Uruk-hai berserkers as they sort of manoeuvre around the field, because archers are likely to, well, they're more likely to miss the Uruk-hai berserkers moving into position, and of course that is their primary weakness. Very, very dangerous when they get into close quarters, particularly against heavily armoured troops. Of course we've also got the Uruk-hai crossbows as well. Again, for the most part you're going to be seeing Isengard always bring at least one unit of them, because it's just too good to pass up those armour-piercing missiles, particularly when it comes to helping to zone out cavalry. Not that Isengard need much help in taking on cavalry one-to-one on a mounted unit, because the champions of the White Hand are, I think, the most deadly anti-cavalry mounted unit in the game in terms of their attack anyway. The Melkor's Chosen, I believe, are slightly tougher to bring down, but the champions of the White Hand have more attack. Very, very deadly. Probably the safest pick for a general on an open field battle like this for Isengard, simply because they're so strong. And just mixed in with them we can also see some Nazkai. I don't know which has actually got the general in them, but it might be the Nazkai. The champions of the White Hand might be being used a little bit more freely without the general. Then over here we've got some half-orc spear guards, so again, just some more units that can be used in an anti-cavalry sense, or even just to plug a line. And some warg riders, so some more mounted units, and just at the front here we can also see some Dunlanding clansmen as I get out of the tree. And as far as militia units go, they have the strongest anti-cavalry bonus in the game, I believe, so again, quite a lot of anti-cavalry tools that can be used here by Isengard, and also quite a lot of deadly infantry in terms of their berserkers and their pikes. Moving on to his ally, which is Frodo, who, that might be the name of someone who has changed it on the Discord, I'm not sure. But they're playing as Rhudaur, so they probably will have some hidden units that I won't be able to show. But at the front here, some Rhudaur pikemen. Again, very, very strong pikes here. Not quite as strong in terms of attack as the Uruk-hai, and you can't bring quite as many of them, but they are very tough with that shield value, helping to mitigate the natural weakness of all pikes against arrows. We've also got some mercenary war chiefs over here, so again, not armour-piercing, but still, they will last in a fight a little bit longer than the slightly lower skilled two-handed axe units that Rhudaur can bring. He's got a couple of units of them. Back here, looks like we've got 2 units of the Rhudaur berserkers. There looks, yeah, there's some crossover here. So 2 units of the Rhudaur berserkers. They cost 1,000 each, so this is a pretty big investment. But they are very, very strong. The 2 volleys of axes they get off really help to deal some damage. And then in melee, they deal some pretty hefty armor-piercing damage of their own. They're not multiple HP, but they can certainly help tie a Rhudaur front line together very, very nicely. Back here, it looks as though we've got the Witch Realm Enslavers. Is this the General's unit? Doesn't look like it. The General doesn't look like they're in this unit, but nonetheless, very, very powerful infantry. Rhudaur's only sort of elite, like super elite tier infantry that they can bring, but of course, you know, very, very strong, multiple HP shock units. Then we have the Ettenwall's Troll Hunters. I think you're always going to see them as Rhudaur, simply because they're again too good to pass up. Doubling as armoured spears in melee really helps them against cavalry, and of course, you know, the armour-piercing missiles that they can deploy also make it very, very difficult to effectively deal with them, because going into their sphere of influence is always a risk. And then finally over here we can see the Rhudaur cavalry contingent, and I assume the general is going to be in this unit of Rhudaur nobles, and indeed he is. And he is going to be riding with a couple of units of Coldfell maidens, which Rhudaur's cavalry line, as I've said before, is pretty decent. I mean, it's not world-beating, but if you underestimate it and if you play poorly against them, then Rhudaur can really do a lot of damage to your own cavalry very quickly. Let's at least see who they're going to be facing across the field, and starting off with Corregin, we have Umbar, and we have some Belagard footmen up on this hill, in addition to some Naaru Royal Guard, which is not the general again, so there are a lot of general's bodyguards on display that aren't actually housing the general, but again, they are multiple HP archers that double as spears, very much in the same vein as the Hearthguard of Amon Sul from Cardlan. Back here again, just out of the tree line, we have some Belagard footmen. And then in here, the general is going to be in a unit of Warlords of Umbar, rather unsurprisingly the Knight unit of Umbar. They don't want to get into sustained melee with the Rhudaur nobles with their AP, but in terms of being a shock unit, the Warlords of Umbar can do a lot of damage to a lot of these units. They need to steer clear of Rhudaur and Isengard's anti-cavalry tools. And then over here, we have Charles 87 playing as Arthedain, and at the front he's got some pikes which are not hidden, and then just in behind them he's got some more elite pikes in the Enumanas Gate Guard. So again, Arthedain's phalanx is very strong, and you can see here that there's some stakes set up, and there's a catapult. Now, I'm not sure where, I guess Arthedain's general is just in this unit of Enumanas Gate Guards, which is an interesting choice, means he can be skirmished down a little bit more easily. The catapult's a bit of a risky pick, because on this map, he has got it on a little hill position over here, but even so, I would suggest that the catapult's going to struggle a little bit to get value in this match, because I think Isengard are going to be upon them very quickly. Because of course in a 2v2, it can be a long drawn out affair, or it can be very quick. There's not a lot of in between there in terms of players that are good, and of course we'll see how this goes. I mean, it is a relatively short match in terms of the frames. So I would suggest, and now the rain is coming down of course, got some Evan Dim archers moving up here to the front line to help stop Isengard's advance, but based on the fact that this is a rather quick match, I imagine that there's going to be no messing around here. Isengard are going to move forward into a position, presumably to try and start putting pressure on Arthedain's lines. Meanwhile, looks as though we're going to have the initial charges here from the Coldfell Maidens. There's a lot of fire arrows coming in here from Umbar's front line, and that's going to be sufficient to grill a lot of these Coldfell Maidens. The Coldfell Maidens are actually pretty good at mitigating archer fire, but not when it's saturated to this extent. So that was a somewhat failed probing attempt here by Frodo. So Rhudaur, I should say, are going to probably retreat back to their position, going to try and use the tree cover to maybe get the drop on their enemies. But you can see that Umbar's forces immediately revealing themselves. That's a lot of archers. They've also got a lot of basic Corsair pikes and spears. So the cavalry is going to struggle to get a foothold here against the Umbar lines. But now we have Arthedain, so Fluffy's moving forward with the bulk of his frontal infantry, with the Uruk-hai infantry here at the front and to the side, and he's also going to be bringing up the pikemen just in behind them. And actually this is where Arthedain's forces might get divided and conquered just a little bit. I mean, the catapult's going to be firing at close range, but it's going to struggle, and it's also going to go through its own man there, which is a bit of a shame. Heavy amounts of friendly fire, but you can see here that I think Isengard is just going to focus their force up on this little hill, try and take the artillery piece, and then if Arthedain moves too many of their troops up to try and support this area, he's then going to try and move in. So I think Isengard have already off to a very good start here, in the Dunedain Peacekeepers here at the front. In fact, what I think we're going to do is we're just going to slow things down, just so we can try and keep track of everything. Dunlanding Veterans going up against the Peacekeepers. The Peacekeepers are a unit of much better quality than the Veterans, but the Veterans are immediately going to be backed up by a column of Uruk-hai pikemen, which is going to be rough on this area up here. Most of the Arthedain pikemen are down here in this slight valley, and the Uruk-hai infantry are already going to move to engage them, and they are going to be backed up by Uruk-hai pikemen as well. So Isengard trying to stretch Arthedain, and with their superior numbers, that's going to be a good move. Arthedain also don't seem to have any cavalry, which is a risky move considering the champions of the White Hand. If they get in behind the enemy lines, that's going to be devastating to a lot of these Arthedain troops. This catapult is also really going to struggle in the position that it's in. It can't really shoot down into this valley too effectively. The Isengard troops are a little bit too thinly spread to really get a genuine connection on them. You can see here that Isengard beginning their wraparound, the Uruk-hai infantry charging in, more Dunedain Peacekeepers as well. So there's a lot of spears and pikes from Arthedain, which means they're not going to be able to kill a lot of these Isengard troops very quickly. there are these dismounted Knights of Illuminus, and there are quite a lot of archers, as you can see. Like, you know, Arthedain are usually going to bring quite a lot of archers because they can field quite a lot of decent quality archers, but these 2 units of dismounted Knights of Illuminus are going to be absolutely critical to try and turn the tide of the fight up here. And you can see that the Dunlending clansmen are moving around. Some of Arthedain's troops have retreated way back here, but these are archers, so as soon as they stop running, the Dunland veterans and clansmen are going to start to hack them down. And these troops are just going to get further and further away from the action. So Isengard pulling apart the Arthedain lines. And as you can see here at the front, the pikes are now getting into position, and as soon as they get into formation, the spears are really going to start to struggle. And the Uruk-hai Berserkers represent a level of damage which I don't think Arthedain are going to be able to match here. I mean, even the dismounted Knights of Illuminus are a primarily defensive unit in nature. You can see here that the Uruk-hai pikes and infantry working in tandem here at the front. The Fornos Lorraine defenders are here at the front, which is a more heavily armoured spearman. But they're not really going to kill the Uruk-hai quickly enough, really. Let's head back over to the other side here. Rhudaur are starting to move forward now. But Umbar have set themselves up into a relatively decent position. There's a lot of these archers, and Umbar's skirmish line is not particularly damaging, but it is very good at dealing with attrition-based warfare. But Rhudaur can, of course, field quite a lot of high damage skirmishes, but getting them into range is a bit risky, and these Foragem Javelins are a perfect target for all of these Umbar forces. I'm not sure what Rhudaur are doing here. They're sending forward a portion of their army, and the Rhudaur Berserkers have moved forward. They're actually in a pretty good position to throw their axes into the Balagai footmen, doing a decent amount of damage. But once again, you can see the crossbow Corsairs returning fire, and Umbar have gone pretty skirmish heavy here. Based on the way Rhudaur are playing, it is paying off, but neither side has really made any significant gains. And I think over on the other side, based on the kind of formation that Arthedain have taken up, it's not going to be too long before Isengard overwhelm them. We can see the Uruk-hai Berserkers getting in here, getting into melee against the dismounted Knights of Illuminus. And with the support of these basic Uruk-hai, the dismounted Knights of Illuminus will likely find themselves outnumbered and outmatched by the sheer amount of damage that's going to be being brought their way by the Uruk-hai Berserkers. And what's going on back here, we can see that the Arthedain units, I mean, they're about to get absolutely smashed into oblivion by the Champions of the White Hand. The Evendim Archers, when they take a charge from the Champions, might well break pretty quickly. The Champions of the White Hand almost certainly are a fear-causing unit, already shaken. So these 2 archer units are going to be cleaned up. That's more troops that Arthedain are essentially thrown to the walls. And these Arthedain marksmen are also trying to get into a good position to fire, but more and more of these archers are being cycled back into the sort of backfield over here, which is perfect territory for those Champions of the White Hand to just mop them up. I mean, here at the front, the Uruk-hai aren't actually having it all their own way. The Arthedain troops are of sufficient quality to hold them back. You know, the Arthedain pikemen keeping the Uruk-hai pikemen in check, while the more quality Arthedain units at the front are starting to make their presence felt against the Uruk-hai infantry. But again, the problem is they don't really have anything to defend their backline, so these Warp Riders are coming in. Also, Rhudaur are sending over their cavalry to help clean up Arthedain, so the weakness has been identified, and some of the pikemen are having to be cycled off the front line, but it's only a matter of time here before Arthedain fall apart. They're being recharged by Champions of the White Hand now. And ultimately they were wrapped around, and they didn't really have any really damaging infantry to counteract Isengard's, and they didn't have any cavalry, which, when you're playing as Arthedain, is a big no-no. Their cavalry is so good that it's too good to pass up, really. I mean, even if you just bring the multiple HP Lancers, you need something in terms of a mounted presence to try and counteract this. You can see that some of the Númenórean Lancers from Umbar have come over here to try and support, but they're getting into melee with the Rhudaur Nobles, which is not really where they want to be. As soon as the charge bonus wears off, the AP from the Rhudaur Nobles is going to really start to make a dent in these Númenórean Lancers, I think. And also the Warp Riders are coming over, so the anti-cavalry from them is going to make sure that the Númenórean Lancers are destroyed in quick order. The Warlords of Umbar are also coming over here, but of course this just means that there's going to be more opportunities for Rhudaur to move forward without the threat of cavalry going in behind their own lines. Of course, there's savages moving forward. Rhudaur's overall lack of armour is likely not going to be... likely means that these Corsair savages aren't really going to have a terrific target to go after. There's Castamir's Legion, however. Umbar, I think, still have the upper hand over here. A lot of this Rhudaur front line has not made any significant progress against the Umbar pike line. Unsurprising, but also I don't think it's going to matter all that much, because Isengard are going to be able to wrap around, and then Umbar's backlines will be compromised. And particularly when the Champions of the White Hand get free again, they're such a strong unit. And these warlords of Umbar have died very quickly. What is that? I mean, they've charged into these Dun clansmen, which have a significant anti-cavalry bonus, but it looks like they were hit by some sort of javelin fire, based on how many corpses there are in a very small space. Now, interestingly enough, let's go back up to regular speed as we get in here. This Arthedain front line, it's now more even, thanks to the cycling off of these pikemen to try and deal with the backlines. Unfortunately, this means that the Uruk-hai have managed to get more of a foothold over here. The Coalfell Maidens over here, that's probably where the javelin fire came from, and then the Uruk-hai archers, and there's still the Spear Guard just waiting in reserve, but these champions of the White Hand are unstoppable at this point. So again, Aria charges the Arthedain lines. As long as they avoid the pikes, there's likely going to be a terminal loss for Arthedain. These dismounted Knights of Numenus, victory is a distinct possibility, primarily because they're fighting mainly Dunlanders, but the Uruk-hai Berserkers are going to make sure victory is going to be Isengard's over there. Simply too many of them. Charging into those Fornos terrain defenders. Dunlanden clansmen are also on station. And again, there's really nothing that Arthedain can do. They really...
The enemy are badly bloody.
I mean, they've got no one to blame but themselves, I suppose. I mean, they did try and cycle back these archers into the backfield in perfect view of the Warg Riders and the champions of the White Hand, so they were just easy prey. And their army composition wasn't really all that balanced. I mean, the artillery has been largely a waste, and the archers were a waste mainly because the Wargs were able to chase them down so easily. No cavalry as well, which again, cavalry against Isengard is risky because of all of their options, but you need to have at least some to defend your back lines. If you have nothing, particularly with how thinly spread your front line is going to be against the numerically superior orcs, you're always going to be in a little bit of trouble. I'm surprised not to see the Dunedain Troll Slayers as well, simply because if they pop up in the right place, they can do a lot of damage to even stump something like the Champions of the White Hand very quickly, especially on a heavily forested map like this. Meanwhile, the front line of Umbar is holding fast against Rhudaur. On this side, however, Rhudaur making a few more inroads, although the Franadine Berserkers and the Blackwolds, which were hidden, have run up against the Castamir's Legion, who for the most part are holding relatively firm with the support of those archers up on that hill. There's a lot of fire arrows being poured into Rhudaur. There goes a general. Based on the fact that there are wargs over there, I would assume that that's the Arthedain general. Moving forward with the Atomors, Troll Hunters and the Witch Raven Slavers into the front of those Corsair Pikes. Corsair Pikes are a very cost-effective front line in this sort of situation, and Umbar are doing very well. I mean, if it were just Umbar against Rhudaur, they would probably win this fight. I mean, the superior position of the skirmishers, the cost-effective trade on the front line there. But over here, Arthedain, I think that's just about it for Arthedain. I mean, the Half-Orc Spearguard move forward. There's still a few units left fighting. But of course it is only really the Knights of Numenus that are still there. They are almost certainly locked morale, I would imagine. Or at least their morale is so high that they're not easily going to be removed. The Dunedain Peacekeepers are wavering, however, so Isengard are about to have success. Uruk-hai crossbows moving up onto the hill. Those Evendim archers have come back, but they will almost certainly be charged down by something. So yeah, Isengard have had pretty total victory over here. If we have a look, the percentage of kills is pretty heavily in favour of Isengard and their ally Rhudaur. Umbar have done pretty well on this flank over here, so let's see what's going on. He has shifted over some Corsair pikemen to try and defend his side. However, it's going to be the rear lines, I think, which are going to be a bit more of a problem. The Coalfell Maidens are pursuing the cavalry, but they are going into the Hornet's Nest back here. Now, this is where Umbar's overcommittal on the skirmishes is going to really bite them. I mean, regardless of their army composition, if this was the situation at hand, they would always struggle. But they're not going to have enough units, I think, to defend their skirmishes. When the Wargs and the Champions of the White Hand come over here, they're going to be able to get some decent charges off. I mean, the crossbow Corsairs are here, and if they get a decent volley, even the Champions of the White Hand are going to feel that. But I just don't think that they have the sufficient units. The Franadine Nobles are also over here, and they're still in pretty decent health. Still 16 of them left alive, charging through the Balagire archers, killing many as they go through. They're going to get caught on the pikes, though. That's not really where they want to be. Having a look here on the front line between Rhudaur and Umbar. Of course, their pikes have done very well for themselves. They've held against multiple units of superior quality to themselves, and that's what cheap pikes can offer you. But again, I think Rhudaur committed their cavalry over to the other flank, and that was really the primary the primary focus. There goes Rhudaur's general again, charging into the pikes. Maybe wasn't the smartest idea, but they can afford to be a little bit reckless at this point. As soon as Isengard arrive on the scene, it's going to be curtains for Umbar, especially on this side. Now that the Rhudaur Berserkers are getting their axes to bite in melee, even the Castamir's Legion is starting to really struggle against the armour piercing that the Rhudaur Berserkers are laying down. Castamir's Legion are one of, well, my favourite looking unit, but also functionally one of my favourite frontline units in the game. But against this specialist unit like the Rhudaur Berserkers, even they won't do too well, and they're also being surrounded by the Etten Troll Hunters. Now the Warlords of Umbar are trying to prevent this surround from the mercenary war chiefs, and they will probably have some success, but the Witch Realm Enslavers are here on the front line, and overall Rhudaur have managed to somewhat surround the pikes, which is a bad sign because that's before Isengard have even truly arrived. And the Half-Orc Spear Guard are coming in. They're getting shot point blank by the Balagire and Corsair archers. A lot of crispy Half-Orcs there. But now the Uruk-hai crossbows being committed to melee, as well as the Dunlanders. There's a lot of battered Uruk-hai infantry. Arthedain's front line did take a toll on the vast majority of the front line Isengard troops, but in the end there was simply too many. Well, you can see in the background the champions, the White Hand and the Wargs, biding their time, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. When all of Umbar's forces have been committed, that'll be when the Wargs come in, I imagine. As those Naruna Ari Royal Guard up on the hill, they're only one unit, and you can see that there are a few gaps in the line which Isengard are using to their advantage, slipping some Dunland clansmen in behind, and there are also the Nazkai. Even without the threat of those mounted units of Isengard, I think the quality of the blue team here is simply too great. Units like the Nazkai and the Witch Realm Enslavers, Umbar really don't have anything left that could deal with them. I mean, the Naruna Ari Royal Guard are decent, but they're primarily based around surviving. Granadine Rangers, presumably they're out of ammunition, just being committed to the front line, preventing a surround on the Granadine Berserkers.
Very much in our favour.
Not exactly the most hardy of frontline troops, though. The Númenórean Lancers are still alive, interestingly enough. Umbar do have a fair amount of their cavalry still alive. They need to get some hammer and anvil on this Rhudaur frontline quickly. I don't think they're going to win, regardless of what they do. But they can certainly claim victory over Rhudaur. But they need to use their cavalry with some haste. I think they're going to try and go for the... It looks like they're going to go for the Rangers. I mean, personally, I would have charged into the Granadine Berserkers. The Rangers aren't really much of a threat, but I mean they will be destroyed quickly at the very least, I suppose. What's going on? So the crossbow Corsairs getting up onto the hill. The Balagire archers are routing in the face of the Isengard push, and you can see now that Isengard are just forcing their way through the lines. All of Umbar's Corsairs are starting to break. There's still a fair amount of this battle left to go, to be honest with you. And the champions of the White Hand are coming in. The crossbows are targeting the Uruk-hai archers, which is not the right target at all. The crossbow Corsairs definitely need to target the champions of the White Hand, otherwise the rest of the Umbar army is going to get flattened very, very quickly. What's going on over here? Well, that was the Warlords of Umbar, but unfortunately instead of charging into more vulnerable units, they decided to charge into what's left of the Granadine Pikes and the Witch Realm Enslavers, both of which have got hefty anti-cavalry bonuses. But the Númenórean Lancers are now charging into the rear of those Granadine Berserkers and doing a huge amount of damage to them, turning the tide of this fight over here. But the rest of the Rhudaur army is en route now that the Warlords of Umbar have been destroyed. So yeah, Isengard and Rhudaur are sort of really crunching down on the Umbar lines. Those Númenórean Lancers need to avoid the Wargs. And what's going on up here? So this is the champions of the White Hand, very rightly going for the crossbow Corsairs as quickly as they possibly can. Apparently the crossbow Corsairs have got an anti-cavalry and melee bonus, but it's not going to help them all that much against the power of the champions of the White Hand. Isengard continuing to advance up the hill. The crossbow Corsairs are wavering, of course. None of the Corsair units are known for their extremely high morale. The Naruna Ari Royal Guard are still alive, and they will be a tough nut to crack. But really, as soon as something like the Nazkai or Witch Realm Enslavers get on hand, it's not going to be too long before the end comes. There's still a pretty healthy amount of Balagire footmen down here in the gap. And there's still some Castamir's Legion as well. Look at those Númenórean Lancers running away from the Wargs. I mean, they're going to charge into those Dunland veterans and probably destroy what is left of that unit. But this is also going to be the end for them, unfortunately. They're about to be surrounded by the Wargs. And that's exactly the sort of target the Wargs like going after, Lancer killers. The Corsair Pikes are actually reforming at this point. You can see that Umbar's lines are starting to break apart completely. And Umbar are a faction with decent morale, especially among their higher tiers, but of course their Corsairs are really letting the side down here. For example, these Rhudaur Royal Guard do have locked morale, I believe. Although towards the end of the fight, any unit can break, of course. The locked morale will certainly help them stay in the fight for a little bit longer. But it's... There's a spear guard over here. I mean, they're trying to chase off some crossbows, I think. What is going on over here? Well, there's some Belagair archers that have come back from routing, but they're also going to be the target of the champions of the White Hand's ire. And also several units of just fodder are being sent over to chase them down anyway. So Umbar is not giving up, but I mean, the end is nigh. Fairly one-sided in the end, but primarily this comes down to the efficiency at which Isengard was able to take out Arthedain. Because over here, I think if the fight had gone on for a long enough period of time, Umbar would have had victory against Rhudaur because of the slightly broken way that Rhudaur approached the Umbar lines, especially considering Umbar's superior position with these terrain features over here and the skirmishes that Umbar had to offer. It really was a pretty decent counter to the more close-ranged focus, Rhudaur. Rhudaur didn't have a lot of their fodder units either. They didn't have a lot of swordsmen or clansmen like they usually do. They focused a little bit more around units that don't really have a significant shield value and a little bit more specialist, which on a forested map is understandable, but it almost backfired. The Nazkai going into the front of these Corsair pikes. But yeah, I mean, I think the problem ultimately was Umbar weren't really able to deal with Rhudaur quickly enough, and that can often be Umbar's problem. They are certainly an endurance faction, more so than a heavy damage faction. And ultimately they needed to dispatch Rhudaur more quickly than they were seemingly doing, in order to sort of form up their army to try and face Isengard. But even if they did that, I think Isengard's victory over Arthedain was a little bit too significant. I think Isengard were always going to be in the driving seat in this battle. Yeah, these Corsair pipes aren't going to last too much longer. So there's those Witch Realm Enslavers. There's still some Forager and Javelins left alive, considering they were marching into the Umbar skirmishes. That's fairly incredible. Gunmen Clansmen. Even now the Corsair pikes are still holding firm. They're wavering, but they're still refusing to break. Pike to pike with the Uruk-hai. Definitely a very efficient unit, potentially, the Corsair pikemen. And with the overall lack of Rhudaur archers, the Umbar front line wasn't really punished for primarily relying on cheaper units such as this. But there go the Corsairs. That's going to be a chain route. So the rest of the Umbar army that isn't broken. Oh, hello. Still just pockets of resistance, and it's going to be this unit. It's going to be the last one standing, I suppose. Rhudaur Royal Guard and basic infantry and pikes from the Uruk-hai. Eventually they will be able to wear down the Rhudaur, I think. There's also those Belagair footmen that have returned, but the champions of the White Hand are over in the backfield over there. So let's go back up to 2 times speed. Slowly but surely these heavily armoured spears are going to be brought down. I like the fact that they combined the 2 Rhudaur units, because as it was in 0.95, neither one of them was really a particularly safe pick, but now I think that the fact that they combine their strengths definitely makes them a little bit more viable. Definitely a safe place to put your general as well, even on foot in a field battle. Cavalry doesn't really want to charge into multiple HP spears unless you know you can get a really clean charge off. This is going to be the end now. Some Belagair footmen are coming back, but I think the final act is going to be a charge from these champions of the White Hand. I think that's going to be sufficient to break these units over here. Certainly the Belagair footmen, indeed. And even the Rhudaur Royal Guard might break in the face of the fear-causing units that are here. They're certainly wavering. And there they go. So victory for the blue team. And again, I think that most of that was down to the efficiency of the Isengard pick and the fact that Arthedain's pick was, you know, not particularly fantastic. I mean, even against a faction with as many anti-cavalry tools as Isengard, in a situation like this, you need something to defend your backlines. Whether, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be cavalry, but even so, I think that based on the fact that Isengard, the champions of the White Hand can only be in one place. You know, regular walks can still take a hefty amount of damage, especially from Arthedain's skirmishers, and a clean charge from Lancers also is enough to skewer quite a lot of wargs off the charge. So even if you don't want to invest too much in your cavalry, at least some in this sort of situation would have been good. And also I think that some of the Dunedain Troll Slayers and a little bit more focus around trying to counteract Isengard's numbers, because as it was, I think Isengard's, they were just too easily able to wrap around Arthedain and start to really put pressure on, and ultimately shut down their skirmishers before they really did anything. So let's have a look at Fluffy Duck's kills. Pikemen getting a decent amount on the front, obviously, probably against the lower tier of Arthedain troops, but obviously the champions of the White Hand getting 608. I mean, they had a field day really against Arthedain's backlines. They were able to recharge their front line. They were able to sort of pick off the skirmishers that had retreated too far into the backfield. And that's how powerful they can be. I mean, they're certainly not a unit. There was actually 2 Walk Riders on the field, but you don't want to leave the champions of the White Hand easy targets like that. They are difficult to bring down, and they are a unit that often you have to prepare especially for. But even so, I mean, it is often a pretty obvious pick from Isengard. So even so, I mean, the archers getting decent. I mean, most of the units getting fairly average amounts of kills. There were several units that broke 100, like the Uruk-hai infantry, presumably again against the lower tier of Arthedain frontline units. But breaking 200 and breaking 600 is a very significant amount. So yeah, thanks to Fluffy for sending me this one, and I guess that this really does tell you that you really should be preparing your army a little bit more for who you're facing. And again, artillery has its place sometimes, but on a map like this and in a situation like this, the orcs are always going to be the ones to make the first move against you 9 times out of 10. And the primary purpose of artillery on an open field really is to try and get your opponent to come to you, and you don't really need to invite the orcs to do such a thing. So just be mindful about when to bring artillery and when to leave it at home, and also make sure to pick for the situation that you're in. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.